Kayla Voss stood silently at the edge of the docking bay, her eyes scanning the horizon. The stars twinkled in the distance, and the distant hum of engines from nearby ships filled the air. To most people, the galaxy was a place of wonder. To Kayla, it was a job, one she had perfected over the past 30 years. She was the deadliest bounty hunter in the galaxy, a name whispered in fear by those who knew the cost of crossing her. For decades, no one had ever escaped her. She had tracked fugitives across hostile planets through deadly spaceports and into the heart of enemy territory. No matter how skilled, no matter how clever, her targets never stood a chance. She was the Huntress, and her reputation was unmatched. But today was different. She had just received her latest assignment from the Ether Syndicate, a powerful and secretive organization that controlled much of the galaxy's underworld. They had a problem, one they needed dealt with quickly, and they needed Kayla for the job. Their target was Jarek Vaughn, a former war hero turned fugitive. Once a loyal soldier of the Syndicate, Jarek had turned against them, exposing their darkest secrets and calling for justice. In return, the Syndicate had framed him for war crimes and put a bounty on his head. Kayla didn't care about the reasons behind the job. She didn't ask questions. She never did. Her job was to track down the target, and that was all that mattered. Simple, clean, efficient. The mission seemed straightforward enough. Jarek was hiding on a small, forgotten moon in the Outer Rim, far from the reach of the Syndicate's usual forces. His location was the only lead Kayla needed. She'd find him, eliminate him, and collect her payment. As she prepared her ship for launch, Kayla couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. It was a feeling she rarely allowed herself to have. She was a professional, after all, and emotions were a luxury she couldn't afford. But as her ship's engines roared to life, she couldn't help but wonder what had driven Jarek to betray the Syndicate. Was he really a traitor? Or was there more to the story? She pushed the thought aside. It didn't matter. Her job was to end his life, not to question why. The journey to the moon was long, but Kayla had seen worse. The dark, cold reaches of space had become her home, and the isolation was something she embraced. It gave her clarity. It allowed her to focus, and when it came time to hunt, her mind was always sharp. When she finally arrived, the moon was barren, a lifeless rock in the vastness of space. The only signs of life were the occasional space station or makeshift settlement, scattered like forgotten relics of a past long gone. Jarek was here somewhere, hiding in the shadows, but Kayla wasn't concerned. She knew how to find people. She always had. Her first stop was the nearest settlement, a small mining outpost with little more than a handful of workers. As she entered the dusty town, the locals eyed her warily. They knew who she was, but they also knew better than to speak to her. Kayla didn't waste time on pleasantries. She went straight to the bar. The bartender, a burly man with a thick beard, didn't flinch when Kayla approached. "What'll it be?" he asked gruffly. Kayla's eyes locked onto his, cold and unblinking. "I'm looking for Jarek Vaughn." The bartender hesitated, clearly not wanting to get involved. "Don't know him," he muttered, wiping down the counter. Kayla's gaze never left his face. She could see the truth in his eyes. He knew Jarek. He had seen him. She could tell by the way his hands shook and the way his voice faltered. But Kayla didn't need to threaten him. She simply waited, knowing that the silence would break him. A moment passed before the bartender sighed. "All right, I know where he is. But you didn't hear it from me." Kayla nodded, silently acknowledging the unspoken agreement. He didn't want to be involved, but he knew he had no choice. The Ether Syndicate was dangerous, and Kayla was even more so. With a quick motion, she placed a small data chip on the bar, a token payment for the information she had just received. The bartender glanced down at it and took it without a word. "Where is he?" Kayla asked. The bartender pointed toward a nearby hangar, a place where old ships were stored and repaired. It was the perfect hideout for someone on the run. Kayla wasted no time. She knew Jarek had to be there. As she made her way toward the hangar, Kayla couldn't help but recall the few memories she had of Jarek. It had been years since they last saw each other, but she remembered him clearly. His sharp eyes, his quick wit, and the way he had always been so full of life. They had fought side by side once, back when they were both soldiers in the same army, fighting for the same cause. But that was before everything changed. Before the war, before betrayal, before the galaxy fell into chaos. They had been close, closer than Kayla had ever allowed anyone to be. But then he disappeared, leaving her behind. She never understood why. Until now, Jarek had become a fugitive, hunted by the same syndicate they had once served. And now Kayla, the huntress, was the one sent to bring him down. The hangar loomed ahead, its large doors partially open. Kayla approached cautiously, her hand resting on the grip of her blaster. She could feel the tension building in her chest. Her target was close, so close. She could almost taste the end of this mission, the reward that would come with it. But something in her gut told her that this hunt would be different. As she entered the hangar, she saw a figure standing near an old, rusty ship. It was him, Jarek Vaughn. He didn't move when he saw her. He didn't even flinch. "Kayla," he said, his voice soft but steady. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Kayla couldn't believe how much he had changed. The man standing before her was no longer the soldier she had once known. He was older, worn down by years of hiding and running. But his eyes, they were the same eyes that had once held so much hope, so much trust, the same eyes she had once loved. "You know why I'm here," Kayla said coldly, her voice betraying nothing. Jarek nodded slowly. "I know," he replied, his tone resigned. "You've come to kill me." Kayla's hand tightened around the blaster at her side. She had done this 100 times before, tracked down her target, taken them out without hesitation. But this time was different. This time the target was someone she had once trusted, someone she had once loved. And for the first time in her career, Kayla didn't know if she could pull the trigger. Kayla stood in the shadow of Jarek, her hand still gripping her blaster. The cold metal felt heavy in her palm, as if the weight of 30 years of perfect missions had come to rest upon it. Her eyes, usually sharp and unflinching, now hesitated. She had tracked down and killed hundreds of targets, each one as cold and calculated as the next. But Jarek was different. He wasn't a nameless face in the crowd. He wasn't an enemy she could dismiss without thought. He was someone she had loved once, someone who had stood by her side, fought beside her, and who had disappeared from her life without a single word. "I'm not the man you think I am, Kayla." Jarek's voice cut through the silence. There was no fear in it, no anger. Just the quiet acceptance of a man who had nothing left to lose. "You've been told lies." Kayla took a step forward, the blaster still in her hand but now at her side. Her heart beat loudly in her chest as her thoughts raced. Was he telling the truth? Had the syndicate framed him? She had been trained to trust nothing, to rely on no one, but now she couldn't stop the flicker of doubt that had crept into her mind. The truth seemed so far out of reach, like a distant star that slipped further away every time she tried to touch it. "Lies?" Kayla asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then tell me the truth, Jarek. Why did you run? Why betray everything we fought for?" Jarek sighed and looked at the ground for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with a sorrow Kayla hadn't seen in years. "I didn't betray anyone, Kayla," he said softly. "I uncovered the syndicate's darkest secret, the one they don't want anyone to know. They were behind the war crimes they accused me of. They've been manipulating conflicts, starting wars to control the galaxy for decades. I couldn't be a part of that anymore, not after what I saw." Kayla's heart sank. She had always known the syndicate was ruthless, but the scale of their cruelty was something she hadn't imagined. She had spent her life doing their bidding, following orders without question. But now, for the first time, she felt the weight of her own choices. She had been part of their system, and that made her no better than the people she had hunted. "So you ran and they made you a traitor," Kayla said, the truth beginning to settle in her mind. "And now I'm supposed to kill you." Jarek nodded, but his eyes never left hers. "If you were anyone else, Kayla, I wouldn't be asking you to listen. But you know me. You know I would never betray you. I would never betray everything we believed in." The air between them seemed to thicken with the weight of their shared past. Kayla closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the battles they had fought side by side. The laughter, the quiet moments between fights when they had allowed themselves to dream of something more. But all of that seemed so distant now, like it belonged to another life, another time. "I can't just let you go, Jarek," Kayla said, her voice trembling. "The syndicate won't let us. They'll come after both of us." "I know," Jarek replied. "But together we can take them down. We can expose them for what they truly are. If we fight together, if we work together, we can make sure no one else suffers like we did." Kayla looked at him, her mind racing. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a life outside the hunt, She had spent so long chasing targets, living for the next job, that she had forgotten what it was like to fight for something more than money or power. Now she had the chance to fight for justice, to fight for freedom, to fight for Jarek. "I never thought I would hear you say that," Kayla said quietly, lowering her blaster. "I thought you were dead to me." Jarek stepped closer, his eyes soft but determined. "I've been dead to everyone for a long time. But I'm not dead to you, Kayla. Not yet." Kayla felt a rush of emotion that she had buried for so long. Anger, regret, hope, all of it mixed together inside her. She had lived a life of silence and isolation, trusting only herself. But now, standing before the man she once loved, she realized that maybe she didn't have to do everything alone. The sound of an approaching ship interrupted their moment. The hum of engines grew louder and Kayla's instincts kicked in. She looked up, her eyes sharp again, her hand reaching for her weapon. "They found us," she said, her voice suddenly all business. "We don't have much time." Jarek nodded. "Then let's make it count." The two of them moved quickly, Kayla grabbing her blaster and Jarek pulling out a data pad, fingers flying over it as he worked to access the Syndicate's hidden files. They needed to gather evidence enough to take down the Syndicate once and for all. But they had to survive long enough to use it. The ship landed just outside the hangar, its dark silhouette blocking out the stars. A group of heavily armed Syndicate soldiers disembarked, their boots thudding heavily on the ground. They were here to finish what Kayla had started, and they wouldn't stop until both she and Jarek were dead. Kayla's heart raced as she crouched behind a stack of crates, watching the soldiers approach. "We can't fight them all," she whispered, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "We don't have to fight them all," Jarek replied. "We just need to outsmart them." Kayla gave him a sharp look. "You have a plan?" Jarek smiled, though there was no humor in it. "I always have a plan." The first soldier stepped into the hangar, scanning the area with a torch. He never saw Kayla coming. She moved quickly, silently, taking him down in an instant. Jarek wasn't far behind, taking out another soldier with precise efficiency. They worked together like a well-oiled machine, Kayla's deadly skill and Jarek's strategy complementing each other perfectly. They didn't need to talk. They didn't need to communicate. Their years of training and shared history had made them a deadly team. Every movement was in sync, every action calculated. The Syndicate soldiers, though skilled, stood no chance against them. Within minutes, the hangar was silent again, the soldiers lying motionless on the ground. Kayla and Jarek stood over their fallen enemies, breathing heavily but unscathed. "Let's go," Kayla said, her voice steady now. "We've got work to do." Jarek nodded, his eyes meeting hers once again. Together. For the first time in years, Kayla felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't alone anymore. And with Jarek by her side, they had a chance to take down the Syndicate and build a future free from the darkness they had both been part of. As they moved toward the ship, Kayla couldn't help but think that this was only the beginning. The hunt had changed. It wasn't about targets anymore. It was about fighting for what was right, fighting for love, and perhaps for the first time fighting for themselves.